I'm Sam Rose, and this is Commerce is Chaos, the podcast for consumer brand founders who know that building a business is messier than the highlight reel shows. Your supplier just missed their deadline, your top product is out of stock, and your competitors somehow just launched the same thing at half the price. Sound familiar? Every week, we dive into the real problems that keep founders up at night, from inventory disasters to supply chain nightmares, because surviving the chaos is what separates brands that fail from brands that scale. No, you have one of the most interesting titles I've actually ever encountered. You are VP of Process at Armra, which
That's right.
seems like a role that's becoming more critical as brands scale, but it's not like every brand has this role. So I'd love to just walk through what led Armra to create this position. Did they create it just for you? Did you create it when you were there? And then jumping from there, like what's a week look like in the life of a VP of Process?
Absolutely. Um, yeah, it's a continuing work in progress. So, we're figuring out what it means every single day. I'm certainly figuring out what it means every single day. The role was definitely created for me, at Armra. And, I kind of was handed the reins of saying, hey, you need to go in here and fix a problem over on the operation side, and now fix a problem on the CX side, and now fix a problem on the marketing side, and then make sure all those problems are solved and talking to each other. Um, and so that's sort of what I wind up doing every day is kind of connecting the dots between the disparate departments and how they work and their priorities, and making sure that they actually are talking to each other in one way or another, and then making sure when something goes wrong, everybody knows exactly who to get angry at because it's probably my fault for not telling
We're going to
everybody
call
that,
Noah.
yeah, what's supposed to happen. And it's exactly it.
How big is your team? And then how big is the org? And where do you kind
Totally.
of sit in it?
So again, very, very unique, interesting setup. I have a team of, I think we're at 10 project managers who report up to me, which
Wow.
is pretty much unheard of. Um, and then I report directly to the COO. So, essentially the way I kind of like to describe it is that I am a third chief of staff and like work super closely with C-suite to kind of understand their directives or their pain points or the things that are really, really priority for whatever reason this week. And then I have this team of project managers who are sort of assigned and seeded out into all the different departments. And, you know, they can kind of take whatever those directives are and flow them out into their departments, and work super closely with the leads of that department and the kind of, ICs in that department, um, to do a couple things. Like the first thing is that wherever you drop into the company, there you are. It's like we're all running in sort of a similar fashion. Obviously, each one is going to have their own idiosyncrasies, but everybody is sort of looking the same. So if C-suite needs to drop into CX or into operations or into marketing, they don't have to spend a day figuring out how this team works compared to another team. And then the other thing is that the project managers reporting back into me allows me to have a really clear-eyed view about what is and isn't working at the company. Um, from like, down to like, hey, so and so isn't talking to this person this week, or, hey, we have like a completely broken workflow that is causing this huge roadblock, and we need to find a solve for it in the next 45 minutes. And then I can sort of float all of that back up to the C-suite and make sure that there is kind of a true visibility across the organization vertically. And then the kind of last thing is the actual process part of it,
Yeah.
which is instituting more than just like an SOP, but workflows and new, if we implement something that, particularly if it crosses multiple departments, making sure that there's adoption across the board, or making sure that if something is implemented and it sucks and everybody hates it, and, that I get in there and figure out, well, what did usually I do wrong? I'd like to say somebody else did wrong, but it's usually me, and try and get in there and fix it.
That's very noble of you. Every operator listening to this right now is falling in love with you, by the
Oh.
way. They're like, I need a Noah. It's happening to me. I'm like, wait, this is such an incredible generalist kind of position to be able to inhabit in the business, but really for you to just be able to drop in, like you said, to any different type of operational area and say, hey, like, there's a problem. We can fix it with people. We can fix it with process.
Uh-huh.
Um, and like, let's kind of, rally the troops and get it done. Do you have, how often are you identifying the bottleneck versus someone saying, hey, I need
Yeah.
help?
Um, you know, it's less and less now because like I'm less in the weeds of like the day-to-day operations of how individual departments are working compared to how it was in the past. So a lot of the time it's my team or other team members coming to me and being like, it, it's sort of a combination, right? Because they're not coming to me usually and saying, "Hey, I found a bottleneck. Isn't this great?" They're coming and saying, "Hey, like this project that I asked for in January still hasn't got the finish line. It's officially your problem now." And so that's an indicator to me that there is a bottleneck somewhere in there. And then it's up to me and to my team to kind of figure out, okay, why did this happen? The kind of regular Sherlock Holmes of an organization. And sometimes we figure it out, and sometimes we're just there scratching our head and we sweep it under the carpet and hope that it goes away. But for the most part, when people float up those reoccurring problems or brand new problems, that kind of gives me the tip off, like, hey, let's go investigate in there. And a lot of the times, I'm sure anybody who's experienced this, that the broken part happens so far away from where the call out is that it's a whole series of looking back and saying, okay, this happened, this happened, this happened, going through all the documentation until you finally figure out, oh, I think actually the problem was honestly usually me setting up wrong in the beginning, and then the problem solved right there. I just won't do that again.
Again, yet again, making the mess and cleaning it up.
Exactly.
Do you have a process for your process? Like, do you have a diagnostic framework that's like, okay, my steps for rebuilding, for diagnosing a problem or a bottleneck and rebuilding the process around it? This is very meta, but I have to ask.
Sure. Um, I think what I really have is like a priority list. You know what I mean? It's like, what's the priority here? And how does that relate to the actual business goals, right? The mission critical projects. Because a lot of the time, like there's stuff that I would love to get in and tweak and turn and twist, but a lot of the times, like I have to be the one that says, "Hey, I understand that's a problem for you. It's gonna have to get solved next week. Today, this week's not the week." In terms of like a framework of how to deal with those different problems, um, there's like feasibility building, there's all of that kind of stuff. I'm sorry, the my dog has entered the conversation.
I mean,
Um,
just put him on speaker.
uh-huh. He probably has more to say about,
He's
all of
really
this.
cute.
Um, and there's all that kind of internal stuff like how, making uh like a matrix for like, hey, how do I rank this problem? How do I rank this new project, right? Like, what's the feasibility matrix on this? So like coming up with a series of questions and getting those kind of a score and then a certain score landing within like a risk tolerance, that's the sort of stuff that I'm doing. Sometimes it's active, sometimes it's just, I've been here long enough to know that if you say these three words, that's getting a red alert immediately, whatever it might be.
Wait, I
Um,
gotta know. Like, give me 3 words. What are your red
uh,
alerts?
my red alerts probably are this. My red alerts are probably going to be this will be no big deal. This will be really easy. We should get this done fast. Those are usually times for me to say, okay, like, are we sure about that? Does that mean, what does that really mean? And then I think, my other red alerts are a lot of the time like, uh, if we need to involve another department in a way that I know is uh, is a huge lift for them that another team might not know. So like, I'm sure this will be easy for the operations team. That's a classic red alert. I'm sure this will be easy for the CX team. Low lift on the marketing team. That's like, it's those things that sort of uh, what make me really dig in and figure out like, okay, what's the actual thing lift going to be?
It's somebody else's problem.
Exactly.
Like,
That's exactly it. If it's somebody
uh,
else's problem, it's probably going to be my problem. So I should
it's
figure
probably
it
going to
out.
be your
Yeah.
problem. um, okay, so you've got a problem. It's at your doorstep. You think about priorities at the business. You kind of make a rank order, and then you listen for flags or signals that like this might be a bigger lift than the person asking. And when they're coming to you to ask, they're saying, "Hey, Noah, like I need help building a process here."
Mhm.
Sometimes, and then sometimes they're just like,
Sometimes it's, can
"Ah."
you connect the dots for me, right? Like,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah.
we have a new product and we want to, create a beautiful box or a kitted, custom solution. Can the operations team do this in this timeline? And then, part of my job, obviously, to bring in the correct ops teams member to bridge those gaps, or to just be like, hey, before we even spend 45 minutes getting on a call and talking through this, I'm going to tell you this is not possible and you need to figure out another solution today. Um, so it's a lot of that. And then, in terms of like building new processes, we're growing so fast and so much is happening for the first time that a lot of the time it's like, okay, that first time we've never done this before. So what worked, what didn't work? And then how can we keep what we liked, get rid of what we didn't like, and start to kind of chisel it into stone a little bit. So that way the next time people know what to do and I don't have to be as involved. That the project managers can come in and just sort of shepherd a project across the finish line without the sort of bumpy back and forth that we had the time before.
And do you find that exercising this muscle within the organization and having, teams and custodians of this sort of like process-based approach, is that accretive? Does everybody kind of get better at process management and project management at the business as a whole? Because it's like clearly it's been prioritized to the tune of having someone who's like, the absolute guardian and expert of it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it becomes everybody's responsibility, Um, and I think, it also empowers people to bring things to the table and say like, hey, can we take a look at this? Can we adjust this? And I think it also sort of takes away that feeling of like, F it, I'm just gonna like throw it up here and hope somebody sees it because people know that you know, if they're put in that situation, there's somebody they can go to help at least if there's nothing there to like, build the safety net as they're jumping. And B, maybe there's something there that they haven't just encountered yet. This is their first time. So there's a bunch of resources and folks and documentation for them to go to and see if we've been here before.
Is there like a tipping point for organizational size where something like this really starts to make, I mean, so obvious to me, like this is amazing. Is there a tipping point for size where you're like, hey, someone's really interested in this approach. You've inspired them, say, a new business owner.
Yeah.
How big do you have to be to deserve this and or to afford it? And if you're not that big yet, what are like the stepping stones to take to get
Totally.
to a place where yes, like we're big enough to have a VP of process and 10 project managers reporting up and like, I mean, to have that amount of systems building capability is incredible.
When I started about 2 years ago at Armra. There were 13 people. Um, and, I was the first project manager there. And it was so obvious. Like, I'm sure so many people have experienced this in those early days of a company. It's like, as you start to move from like 6 to 13 and from like 13 to like 25, you can no longer just sort of everybody hop on a huddle or a Slack or an email chain and just like figure it out together. That's sort of that first point where you actually just need to instill some sort of functional flow so people know what to do. And you don't have that thing where you've sent something off and it's been created, people spend time and money on it, and then you get it back and it's not what you thought. And you kind of have to look through and say, okay, who made the mistake here? Or did we all make a mistake? And, we're having to sort through, Slack messages from 6 months ago and images that don't make any sense anymore.
Yeah.
Um, I think really our tipping point was like around we started when it was still pretty small, I think. I mean, I think it was in like the 30-ish person range, maybe a little bit more. But I think even then, starting to lay those super strong foundations of how the organization should work and being able to start to organize what will soon become the history of the organization is super crucial because in a year and a half, you're going to be asking, where is this contract we signed? How much are we paying this person?
Right.
Why did we do this? Where is the packaging that we approved? And why, what the hell were we thinking? So, there's the sooner you can start, the better, because I think once you start to hit a growth trajectory, things spiral. I don't want to say spiral out of control, but they just grow so quickly that it's just so hard to kind of keep reining things in if there's not folks who are dedicated to doing it. And I think particularly departments start to splinter as well. They start to become fragmented and they start to lose the easy ability to speak to each other as their work gets more and more specialized. So I think like that's a good indicator of like, oh wow, you know, the CX team and the operations team used to work hand in hand when there were two people. But now that they have
Right.
full teams and their workflows are so much different, they have completely different technologies. Um, they're not able to talk to each other in the same way. And it's not because they don't like each other. It's because there's no connective tissue between them on how to continue to grow. Um, so yeah, I think there's like indicators that come up as opposed to like a hard, size in terms of personnel.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what you're getting into is this question of sort of inadvertent information silos between
Uh-huh.
teams. I'm curious how you start to systematize that approach to like creating a visibility, accountability.
Cards on the table. Your tech stack is held together with duct tape and prayers. If you're a brand founder or COO juggling Shopify, your 3PL portal, 3 different inventory trackers, and yes, that one crucial Google sheet, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Orders get lost, inventory counts are fiction, and your seamless integrations break every other Tuesday. Endless Commerce changes the game. One platform for everything. D2C, wholesale, marketplaces, the works. AI-powered forecasting, real-time inventory visibility, and integrations that actually integrate. Teams like Great Jones, Food 52, and Pattern Brands have already made the switch. Ready to ditch the chaos? Visit endlesscommerce.com, mention the podcast when you reach out, and get 3 months free. Because your op stack should be your competitive advantage, not your biggest headache.
Do you have like this is the SOP for gonna be talking to each other better, or like some like cornerstones of creating that connective tissue that you find yourself coming back to over and over again?
Well, I think it becomes like a lot because we have all these project managers, it becomes their responsibility to almost act as that creative tissue. Because a lot of the times, like, we love to move fast, we love to move aggressive, which means things change that might have happened in a two-person call that have ripple effects across the organization. And it's great if you can catch it in that call and nail it and be like, yes, press this button and then it slides across the rest of the organization. But often, you're moving it just as fast as them. And so you have, 10 other things to activate on that. So when you have this sort of connective tissue of project managers, it becomes their responsibility to disseminate that information and also to know what information is relevant to their department. So, when they sort of work as a team, if a date gets changed or a, a sale is activated or whatever, each team knows what that means for them and knows what questions to ask and knows what information they need to bring to their team. So I think, we sort of have like a project management charter for each individual team. So like, here's what you're responsible for. Here's what you should keep an eye out. And every other project manager also can relate to that. So when something changes, there's all these kind of redundancies, which is like, okay, well, the first step is let's alert the person needs to know. The second step, redundancy is like, well, now we have this meeting where we're going through all the changes that have been made. And then the third one is, hey, I think this got missed, but I'm still here. I'm going to stick my nose where it doesn't belong and make sure you have the information you need.
And so it sounds like people are a really important part of making all of this work. And of course, people and technology are kind of going hand in hand. Is there a basic PM stack that you come back to as like, okay, we're going to be talking in Slack and we're going to have either this many meetings a week or not more than X number of meetings a week? And, broad corporate culture, of course, changes opinion on this every few years. So it's like, we're doing meetings. We're not doing meetings. Like, we're doing Slack. No, we're doing synchronous communication. What's your stack?
We have our, we use, our project management software. We use Monday. So everybody is familiar with that and knows exactly, it's almost like a uniform across departments with small changes. So that way everybody's kind of communicating that way. We have our sort of weekly check-ins. We have our smaller team check-ins. We have our ad hoc check-ins. Um, and the thing that's interesting is like, because each department is so different, like they're very autonomous, right? Like I'm not really trying to micromanage them or, say what's going on. I kind of let them go off, manage their workflow within their department, and then flow back to me and that team for those check-ins. So I try to keep it as loose and autonomous as possible because they're going to have so much better eyes and ears of what's actually going on, what's working, what's not working than I possibly could. So I think in terms of stack, it's really like one main check-in, very standardized workflows when it comes to gathering actual approvals, running things through, actual check-ins with like completed work. And then the rest of the time, it's like, hey, go off, know what your um, know what your realm is and completely own it and come back and let us know how things are going.
Yeah. Okay, so Monday sounds like it's a piece of it. And I'm going to say the AI word. So
Certainly, of course.
there's having, kind of like systems that you've built that you've got human operators working through. Then there's automations that you can add on to that, which I wouldn't call AI necessarily. I mean,
Sure.
lots of automations were available 10, 15 years ago too. And then there's sort of like agentic behaviors, where you're maybe taking a repeated workflow from what might have been a human operator 5 years ago and saying, okay, well, we're just going to repeat this process ad infinitum, but with different variables coming in every time, which a basic automation can't necessarily handle. How do you think about AI and automation or automation kind of fitting in to how you're guiding your team to be using the latest tools?
Yeah, it's a big project for us actually. And kind of what I would call like our next big frontier within my personal team.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I think that like, I want to lift my team out of doing busy work. You know what I mean? Handing things off, doing the back and forth, things that can be automated and things that can be, combined automation and AI. Like they don't really need to be doing that anymore. And what is so much more useful for them to do is to kind of, again, be that connective tissue, which is not just about, handing a document back and forth, but understanding when that document lands at the team that is not their own, what's the feedback? How do I gather that feedback and then how do I action it, and then turn that into an automation
Yeah.
after a couple of iterations. So it's a huge project and it's something I'm really excited about. And it also helps, to have all those processes, to have all the SOPs down on paper. You can just start to plug in, all right, what's something that I think we're repeating over and over. What's something that we can just like plug in, almost like plug and play on that.
Yeah. Well, and I think something really interesting in what you're sharing is that there is a sense of what you're pointing at is integrations, right? But integrations human to human, and we have verbal and nonverbal communication cues that help us better integrate processes with each other. Because you can sit across the table and be like, okay, is this working? Is this not working? Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you not?
Mhm.
In a way, that's so much harder than with technology where you have to engineer the integration. And one of the pain points in my business was always like, I've got some amazing systems built out. And when it's humans just in the systems, like, well, we can talk to each other. But unless I have literally like an API to connect these two things together, or I can write a script for it or a webhook or whatever, then I've got like amazing systems that don't touch each other, which,
Yeah.
Frustrated me to no end. And it is, of course, like my new, crusade is to
Yeah.
like make
Yeah.
integrated systems.
I mean, it really is like the thing. It's like, how do you get something on one end of the business to travel through like, all the different things that, it's going to touch, and then do something on the other end of the business and then bounce it all the way back to the other end of the business and let it know that it worked, or didn't work, or what the feedback is. It's yeah, it's a big task. It's a big task, but if you can make it happen, I mean, just saving those few hours of work, and also just having people be able to relax and say, okay, I don't have to worry that this person forgot. You know what I mean? And instead of saying, hey, you messed up, you're the reason this is late, it's like, no, the automation isn't working. We can just fix that. I think that would make me sleep a little bit better at night.
Yeah. You and I are both experiencing a little bit of PTSD. Like, I can see you like thinking back to hairy
Uh-huh.
problems of the past. Um,
Uh-huh.
let's talk about teams for a second. And it sounds like you've got an incredible one to partner with. How often do you find yourself um, in a position where you really have to say, "Hey, like we can't just solve this with like a new piece of tech, or we've got all the tech we need, but we need another operator
Uh-huh.
inside it." Do you have a resourcing kind of decision tree around that? Maybe internal versus something outsourced. Maybe like do you find yourself having to make the business case for like, hey, we're going to invest in X, whether that's a person or a big piece of tech, um,
Yeah,
and then making the
definitely.
case?
You know, I think a lot of the time, in my position anyway, which I don't think is regular, a lot of the time it has to do with looking forward to the next 6 months and trying to predict where growth is going to happen, and setting people up um, there before it happens, or at least like so that they land right as it's about to happen. Um, because just how my bizarro and amazing department is set up is that, like, we want people there to shepherd it across and shepherd it forward and to grow within that department and help that department grow. So I think a lot of it has to do with being really aware of what smaller departments are going to become the core functions or the semi-core functions of the business in the next 3 to 6 to 8 months, and starting to understand, what their pain points are and if it can be solved with an extra set of hands, and also, what those hands should be doing, not just sort of maybe not just kind of classic PMing, but also somebody who maybe has hands-on skills in that department so they can be called to lead. Um, and, in the larger departments, things that are already more established, that are really already core functions of the business, um, it's about, I think a lot of the time it's about managing the workload of the person who's already covering that business, but also about starting to seed great future operators into those departments, which is really something fun that I get to do, which is say, hey, I think like you're ready to take on a chunk of that department that no longer is kind of related to me. And I just need to find somebody underneath you who's going to maybe seed in the next year or whatever, from
Yeah.
there.
And what do you look for, or how do you know when you're successful? Like, what does success look like when you've done it right?
Yeah, when I've done it right, um, what happens is that that person is already so integrated with that team that when they start a new role that is no longer underneath me, um, there's no training that needs to be done. They
Uh,
just are taking on new work and new work streams. They're already so integrated with that team that they are just hitting the ground running day one, which is, in a completely um, not related, but sort of almost like a step up into the side role, which is really, really cool to be able to do that within the organization. And I think the second thing that I know when it's worked is that when we have conversations, because now they have to come and ask me for, to solve these problems or whatever it might be, we're already speaking the same language. So something that might take a new hire 3 or 4 or 5 months to kind of understand not just how we operate, but also like the historical knowledge that comes, which is, can be really, really important in an organization. They already have it, so we are already, speaking the same language. We know how to handle both the internal systems and also sometimes the internal politics of the organization to get things done really, really quickly.
Is there a favorite process of yours? Like, what's the best process you've ever built where you're like, oh God, this is beautiful. Like, if only
Oh,
the whole
the
world had
best
this.
the best process I think that I ever built, everything I have built is done in tandem with the team and with my managing staff. So like I don't like
Okay,
to
we'll
take
give
credit for any
everyone
one
credit,
thing,
but
but but I think like the best process that I have built is it's not really like a capital P process. It's more the way that my internal team functions. So to be able to set up goals for the top of the week, let them go out, understand what's happening in the organization, and then without any, you know, needling or probing or pushing or prompting, to watch them bounce back and forth across each other. Hey, you need to know this. Hey, is this happening? When did this happen? When did this happen? In a way that is crucial for the success of the organization. To do that and kind of have my hands off, I think that's the thing that makes me the most happy in terms of process is that I've kind of set up these core team members to be totally functional, to understand their role and to understand the processes of like how the actual business functions and what's core to business functioning, and
yeah.
to be completely on top of that. That's really what makes me very happy.
So tell me either if you can for Armra, but otherwise in the abstract, what is the operating rhythm of a day, a week, and a month? Like, are there these moments or touchstones, collaborative or async, that you find are really a part of that kind of foundational roll up of like, oh, okay, like we're on track now.
Hmm. I think daily it's just those check-ins with the team. Here's what's changed, here's what's new, here's the priorities for the day. Um, I think, weekly it really is like here's what's core to the 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 operations of the business. What can you tell me about this? Let's focus on this. What can we clear off? What can we discard? And how can we set up a functioning flow to get these things done? And then monthly, it's really check in with my managers like, hey, here's what's working, here's what's not working. uh, how do I unblock this? Because I don't always have that answer.
Uh,
Um, and also, here's my proposal for how we could set this up, how we could unblock this, how we could deal with this problem. Does this actually align with where you're seeing the business from a level above me? Does this actually set up our team and the entire company up for success, or is this just a fun project that I'm working on?
Got it. Okay. So if I'm tracking on that right, basically there's a daily rhythm of check-ins where it's like you said, what's changed, what's new, what are our priorities just for execution for the day. Weekly that rolls up to sort of like broader business priorities, but on a maybe like medium scale. And of course, like the time frame is similar to the priority framing here.
Exactly.
And then on a monthly basis, you've got check-ins, right? Are these meetings that you're in? Are they memos that you share that sort of help to clear the space around these kind of bigger operating issues or priorities, proposals, what's working, what's not
Yeah,
working?
usually meetings, because a lot of it is, you know, honestly more effective to just like sit down and talk through kind of the intricacies of like what is and isn't working, because a lot of it is it's there's a lot of nuance to the stuff, it's like it's not all as much as I wish it could just be like A plus B equals C. A lot of the time it's like, well, how do we, you know, the I think it's not my job to sort of like impose things onto people, but to react to how the business is working and try and set it up to run in that direction. It's helpful that way, so that way, it is more in line with like the natural rhythms of the business of the people who work there and who ultimately like who create the business, you know what I mean? And so I think that's usually my approach, is to try and match that natural flow of what people naturally want to do and find a way to kind of make that work and present that, as often as I can to the rest of the teams.
Can you think of a time when you had a process that was like super dialed for a certain scale, and
Mhm.
then one day it broke and
Oh
you're
my
like,
God,
okay,
it
we got to
happens
start
all the
over?
time. It happens all the time. Early on, like when I really first started, it was something simple like, how we approve packaging. And it was this really locked in step by step. Each person had you know, their own specific area from which they were looking at this packaging and checking it through. And we had it, I mean, we just had it absolutely dialed. And I think it's just like woke up one day and it's like, we can't do this anymore. Like, what are we doing here? And then it was, pulling people out of it. It was so sad because it was like the first one that I had put in and it was really working. I was so proud of it. And it was, I think it's like my experience is just when something is finally running smoothly, that usually means it's going to blow up. It was like it had just settled in. People were just getting comfortable with it. And I think at that point everybody was like, hey, we've scaled out of this. We need to change it about 12 more times. But, I've accepted that that's really part of the rhythm, and part of the fun of it is that it's not about finding the perfect thing and then you lock it and nobody can touch it. It's really about every day, how can we make it a little bit better? How can we make it 1% better, 1% easier? How can we remove this one point of confusion, this one little hiccup that everybody seems to be catching on that might result in a full revamp of, whatever we're trying to get done, but that makes it like, interesting every single day.
Well, and I'm reminded by what you said that, sometimes building process is really about building. It's like, let's engineer steps,
Mhm.
check-ins, phase gates, all that sort of thing. And sometimes engineering a good process is about breaking it and like
Totally.
then stripping things out. And anytime I've been called in to sort of like, or found the need for myself to like reestablish the right size process, that's kind of one of the first questions I have to face is like, do I need more in here or do I need less in here?
Yeah.
And the answer is not obvious. It's not always obvious. I don't know if you've had a similar
Oh,
experience, but
totally. I mean, a lot of the time you're like, yeah, this person will do this, and then we'll send it over here and spin it around. And it's like, it becomes a huge pain in the ass for people. And you're sitting there being like, this is amazing. I've come up with the best idea. And people are like, no, I just want like a straight line. Just give me the straight line. And, and that's okay. I mean, ultimately it is what's best for the people who are stuck doing it. So, that's part of the game.
yeah, it's part of, I think, the fun and joy of being sort of a process or a project manager too, is
Yeah.
to kind of like dig in there. It's such the best moment. You're like, this is utterly broken and
Yeah.
everyone's mad. Like,
Yeah.
but then like you fix it and everyone's really happy and relieved, and it's never permanent, but there's a lot of joy in it, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So our audience is, consumer brand
Hmm.
operators
Hmm.
primarily. This is the part where we're going to use you to help everyone else.
Okay.
If you had to share one systematic approach that like any operator could or should implement in like 30 days or less
Uh,
to make their lives better, more efficient, what would it be and how should they get started?
One systematic approach. I think that it's very, very simple, but I really think that if somebody has say on a project, to get their input in writing in a linear matter, in a linear form. I know that's sort of oblique, but like what I have found is that so often, if you cannot move things forward in a linear way, if people are jumping in and all around, you just completely lose a project. If you have, somebody from a different department coming in, adding something, and then, it goes down to somebody who doesn't understand the notes before, it adds so much time, so much confusion. So I think whenever you can find something that can be presented in a linear way, if you understand sort of the hierarchy levels of the project, and you can really document what the questions are, what the additions are, what the changes you would want to be, and take a sort of snapshot at each moment. Again, this is a luxury, but this is what when it's going well, that's what it is. It allows you to kind of get to the end, make an informed decision based on everybody's needs who's involved down the line, and in a week or a month or 6 months, go back and look at the decisions that were made so you either can repeat them exactly as they were or make sure you never do them again. I would say that's like my basic approach to something like that, just something that you can do quickly that can really make a huge difference.
And so it sounds like a part of that approach is to someone's got to understand the problem, be having conversations and break it down. Breakdown is the first piece. What are we dealing with here? Then you have to document what is happening and then redocument maybe how you want it to be happening or what needs to change. What are, line by line, like we were doing it this way.
Yeah.
Now we'll do it that way. And that over time and through lots of validation and probably trial and error turns into a process that you can start quickly on just by like understanding the problem, documenting what that is, making it shareable, and then iterating.
Exactly. That's exactly it. In fact, I
Rad.
might have to steal that actually.
Oh, it's yours now. This has been such a delightful conversation. Thank you so much for coming and sharing of your wisdom, your experience. I'm sure that everybody listening probably wishes they had a Noah, but I solemnly swear to Armra that they can keep you.
Well, really my pleasure. Thank you for letting me talk, and it's been really, really fun.
Yeah, thank you again. If people want to find you, what's the best place for them to get in touch?
Gosh, LinkedIn probably. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but I'm on there. I just put really dumb stuff up there and embarrass myself constantly, like we all do.
All right. Well, if you want to watch Noah embarrass himself, we'll post a link in the show notes. And thank you again. It's been a real treat.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Commerce is Chaos. If you're listening, I have a feeling you know just how much good leaving a 5-star review can do for a team. Drop us a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to Commerce is Chaos wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to our Substack, also called Commerce is Chaos, for more good stuff and actionable tools to build your business.